They say blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you how easily it clots when it's left out in the cold. Imagine waking up from an 8-hour surgery, your body stitched together and your mind hazy from anesthesia, only to find that your own parents didn't check on your twins or hold your hand, they checked your bank balance. Imagine sitting in a hospital bed, clutching a phone with trembling fingers, realizing that while you were under the knife, the people who gave you life were changing your passwords to manage family expenses. They didn't just steal my savings, they stole my safety while I was too weak to fight back. They took the inheritance my grandfather left specifically for my children's future and funneled it into my sister's failing lifestyle brand to save her reputation. They thought I was the weak link, the quiet one, the daughter who would just take the hit and move on for the sake of family peace. But they didn't know I had left my laptop open in the kitchen that morning. They didn't know that every cruel word, every whispered plan to bleed me dry, and every laugh they shared about my naivety was being recorded in high-definition audio. They saw a victim in a hospital gown. I saw a family that needed to be burned to the ground. And that was the moment I knew, the real revenge begins now. If you're drawn to intense, true-feeling stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice that cuts deep, make sure you subscribe to this channel. These stories only get darker from here. The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it haunts. It was a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks after the surgery, and the neon lights of the city were bleeding into the puddles like spilled ink. I sat in my car outside my parents' suburban home, the engine idling in a low, rhythmic growl that matched the steady thrum of my pulse. I looked at the twins in the rearview mirror, sleeping soundly in their car seats, oblivious to the fact that their own grandparents had tried to trade their college funds for a few more months of my sister's social status. My sister, Julianne, was the golden child, the kind of woman who wore her cruelty like a designer coat, expensive and perfectly tailored. She was a brand consultant in Manhattan, which really meant she spent our family's legacy on loft rentals and networking parties where she could feel important. I was the one who stayed behind, the one who worked the boring corporate job, the one who actually took care of our grandfather in his final days. And yet, Julianne was the one they protected. Julianne was the one they invested in with my money. I felt the weight of the digital recorder in my pocket, a small, cold piece of plastic that felt heavier than a lead brick. I remembered the smell of the hospital room, the sharp, sterile scent of iodine and the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. When I finally got my phone back, I had tried to log into my brokerage account to check if the automatic payment for the twins' daycare had cleared. Invalid password. I tried my savings account. Invalid password. When I called my mother, her voice was a masterpiece of manufactured concern. "Oh, honey, don't worry about that now," she had said, her tone dripping with fake honey. "We just moved things around so Julianne could handle the bills while you were incapacitated. You know how disorganized you get when you're stressed. It's all for the family expenses." But I knew Julianne didn't have bills, she had debts. And I knew my father hadn't looked at a spreadsheet in a decade. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just hung up and opened the remote access app on my phone that linked back to the laptop I'd left at their house. I hit play on the audio file recorded the night before my surgery. The recording started with the sound of a wine cork popping. Then, my sister's voice, sharp and cold. "If we don't move the grandpa's trust money now, the bank will flag the transfer after she's out of surgery. She's going to be out of it for days, Mom. It's the perfect window." My father's voice followed, muffled but clear. "It's not stealing, exactly. It's just reallocating. She has a stable job. You have a vision, Jules." And then, the laugh. Julianne's laugh, like glass breaking under silk cloth. "She'll never even know. She'll just think the market dipped or she miscalculated. She's always been so bad with the big picture anyway." That was my big picture. I was a piggy bank to them, a resource to be mined while I was literally being sewn back together. I felt something inside me click, a cold, terrifying clarity. I realized that the woman they thought they knew was gone. The sister who let Julianne take the credit for every holiday dinner, the daughter who let her father believe his silence was wisdom, she had died on that operating table. Revenge, I realized, is not about the first strike, it's about the architecture of the fall. I spent the next month being the perfect victim. I leaned into the recovery, letting them think I was still foggy and confused. I let them bring me soup and pat my hand while they lied to my face about my dwindling accounts. I watched Julianne post photos on Instagram from a luxury retreat in the Hamptons, wearing a watch that cost exactly what my son's surgery would have cost. I smiled at her. I told her she looked beautiful. And all the while, I was building a cage out of her own secrets. Julianne's entire world was built on a house of cards, investors she had lied to, favors she had traded that weren't hers to give, and a tax history that was more fiction than fact. I didn't just have the audio of the theft. I had accessed her cloud drive while I was managing her old iPad. I saw the shell companies. I saw the falsified invoices. The final act didn't happen in a dark alley. It happened in the most expensive boardroom in New York City. Julianne was hosting a gala for her new sustainability initiative, a front designed to lure in a massive series of venture capital investments. My parents were there, beaming, dressed in clothes my money had likely bought. I walked in late, wearing a dress that cost more than their respect. I didn't look like a woman recovering from surgery. I looked like a woman who had come to collect a debt. When Julianne saw me, her eyes widened for a split second before the mask of elegance slid back into place. "Grace, you're here. We didn't think you were up for a trip to the city," she chirped, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, just an inch, making her stumble. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Jules. It's a big night for the family business, isn't it?" I waited until the main presentation, when the room was full of the city's most powerful investors and the press was ready for her visionary speech. The tech team at the gala was high-end, but every system has a back door if you know the person who installed it. Instead of her promotional video, the massive 4K screens behind her went dark. Then, the audio started. It wasn't the theft recording, not yet. It was a montage of her speaking to her investors in private, her voice dripping with contempt for the very people she was currently courting, interspersed with her laughing about how easy it was to play the system. The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Julianne stood frozen in the spotlight, a beautiful statue of a liar. Then, I stepped up to the microphone. I didn't yell. I spoke with a quiet, devastating precision that made people lean in. I played the recording of my parents and Julianne discussing my bank passwords while I was in the hospital. I played the sound of my father agreeing to rob his own daughter. I watched my mother's face turn a sickly shade of grey in the front row. I watched my father look at his shoes, unable to find the wisdom he'd hidden behind for years. "This isn't just about money," I told the room, the audio of their betrayal looping in the background like a funeral dirge. "It's about what happens when you decide that the people who trust you are just obstacles to your own ego." I looked directly at Julianne. "You wanted a big picture, Jules. Here it is." The aftermath was a landslide. The investors didn't just walk away, they sued. The authorities didn't just investigate, they raided. Julianne's brand evaporated in 48 hours, leaving her with millions in debt and no one to bail her out. My parents found themselves in a social exile so cold it felt like a prison. They tried to call, tried to apologize, tried to blame Julianne for manipulating them. I changed my number. I changed my passwords. I took the remaining trust fund, which I had legally frozen the moment I left the hospital, and moved it into an account my children will only see when they are old enough to understand that blood doesn't give anyone a right to bleed you dry. I sat in a new office, high above the neon streets, watching the rain wash the city clean. I wasn't happy, exactly, but I was at peace. The weight was gone. The debt was settled. And for the first time in my life, when I looked in the mirror, the eyes staring back weren't haunted anymore, they were free.